All right.
Yeah.
So, hey, Mia. Mia's back. So I'm John. Sweet. So I'm John. Mia is standing over here in red, and Robert is over in the corner over there. And I don't know where the other John disappeared to, but the four of us, oh, John's up in the corner. The four of us make up XR Creators, and we've been doing bi-weekly events for the last few months where we have people of all sorts of different backgrounds come up and talk about what they're doing with VR and AR. And this week we are fortunate enough to have Stephen and Simon doing their presentation on XRTK. We've been doing bi-weekly events, but we're actually going to start doing weekly events here for a little while for the next couple of months. And if you could not come up to the stage and maybe go find a seat, that would be perfect. We do tend to kick people if you're misbehaving, so we would appreciate your typical good behavior. And this is what happens when you don't listen to us. All right. So this is Stephen and Simon. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Thank you both for showing up, and thank you all for being here today.
Thank you for inviting us. Simon, would you like to go first?
I'd love to go first, but unfortunately, you're first on the slide.
Okay. Oh, that's an old picture with really long hair. So I'm Stephen Hudson. I've been working on the Mixed Reality Toolkit for a few years. Let's see, where to begin? So I've got about 15 years of experience just in Unity in general. About as long as Unity's been around, I've been using it. That's quite a long time, and in that time I've seen a lot of changes and for the better. Let's see. How did I get started in software? So it's kind of interesting. So I actually started out as an artist. I have a fine arts degree by education, and as I progressed through my career, I found myself having to do more and more technical things. And because Unity is essentially one of those gateway drugs into coding, I found myself doing more and more scripting over time. And so now I'm working at Lenovo. I just accepted an offer there just this last month before the virus scare. And so I'm very fortunate and lucky to be working there. But now I'm their mixed reality software architect. So let's see. I'm also a Microsoft MVP. I've done a lot of work with the Microsoft Mixed Reality Toolkit, and now we've kind of started off going on our own with the XRTK to try and get more and more cross-platform support supported within it by more natively, essentially. Anyway, Simon?
Okay, then fine. Me! With one very dark night on a midsummer's evening. Okay, so yeah, I'm Simon Darkside Jackson. I'm a Microsoft Windows MVP in the mixed reality and also the Xbox space. So I've been doing games for as long as I can remember. Granted, I'm a man of two hats. Okay, so by day, I'm a software architect in healthcare, which you can imagine I'm rather busy at the moment. So I will still find time for doing events like this, speaking about the kind of technology we work on in our spare time. Because by night, I don my cape and off I fly, and I'm off evangelizing, helping people building new things, new development kits. I went and inducted almost Hodgson over here when you inducted me into the Hollow Toolkit rather surreptitiously, and then we sort of both then launched off onto ourselves to actually provision what was to become the Microsoft's Mixed Reality Toolkit. I said until at some point that they were staying purely enterprise, we want to be fully community, so the XRTK was born, so keeping to our traditional vision, which is everything we're going to show through today. I'm also an author of 2 Unity books, which I'm always out there trying to do things, get out, and then trying to basically do almost everything else in the world. And if you've not seen it, I'm also running some series at the moment as part of my MVP-ness. It's actually showing people how to create sessions in AltSpace as well, amongst other things. Anything we can do to try and make lives people's easier, make developers' lives faster and easier, and that's exactly what we're going to see today with the XRTK, which hopefully will blow your mind, as it were. So, Glenn, do you want to set the state of today, or do you want to go?
Yeah, let's kind of talk about that for a while. So let's kind of talk about the history of some of the some of the developments and some of like what it has taken to get to where we are today. Let's see. I started off doing in college. I was doing AR work specifically, and I was using a lot of Unity at the time. I think the only AR package at the time was this Qualcomm asset package that you can get off of the asset store. This is like 2007. Wow, this is a long time ago. Yeah, it was about 13 years ago. Yeah. And let's see. So that was the only thing that was really available. And I remember using that for the first time to kind of start doing my first augmented reality projects in Unity. And ever since then, it's been kind of a fight and a struggle to get good tools and support for creating augmented and virtual reality applications within not just Unity, but also, in Unreal and in the web. So at the moment, especially within Unity, there's a very fragmented state of development. We have all these different packages and things, and especially with Unity, it's kind of it's been kind of like the Wild West the last couple of years. Even like before, back in 2015, with the previous state, there was like no support for any sort of like VR stuff. And then, here comes HoloLens. So in 2015, I was invited to go to Microsoft to help launch the HoloLens with some of their preliminary apps, and found ourselves very quickly trying to figure out, how do we first off, how do we like start supporting a completely new type of platform within Unity? But not only that, but then being able to get new projects up and off the ground really quickly. So while I was working at Microsoft on that as a vendor, quickly we found out, we started passing, these little scripts around, and it eventually became what everyone saw as the Holo Toolkit when it finally got published in February of 2016, I think. So actually I'd been working on the Holo Toolkit since before it was even open source, while we were still working at Microsoft. So it's been an interesting ride, right? So I've worked on both the Holo and Mixed Reality Toolkit since the very, very beginning. And so even now, like, Unity's finally started to do their XR plugin architecture, which is actually based off of a lot of like what we've done to kind of set up that. So you guys will see a lot of that. It is getting better, and we're positive that as the state of as people continue to move forward and as the tools get better, we'll be able to just kind of streamline these things a little bit better. But one of the important things that we found out early on was like there was no unified input system within Unity. You could get asset packages like in control and other things, but there was no really like a defined cohesive input system for Unity that really made sense for doing AR and VR, or even just anything cross-platform for that matter. Go ahead.
Yeah, and not just on Unity itself. There's also talking about all the different SDKs, all the different platforms. We've got, every single vendor is going to create their own store. They all have their own little asset package and DLLs. They all do things differently, and it kind of drove us nuts, the fact that, okay, fine, I'll go build my stuff for Oculus. Great. Oh, want to do it for Steam? Oh, well, you've got to rewrite it because it's completely different. I think toolkits like the XRTK tried to help, and a few others, where they took all these packages and sort of shoved them together to run all in the scene, then just turn them on and off as appropriate. And I know with version 4 it got a little bit better, but it's still the state where you were taking all these different things and then you had to try and mold your project, each and every platform, try and get another build out, and it just creates chaos.
Right, exactly. And then you either had to choose VR or AR, and you couldn't really do both up until recently. And that's been more of a recent development. Like Unity's AR Foundation is a pretty good stab at that, and I think that they've done a really great job with that so far, and we'll probably see a little bit more. But as we'll kind of get into talk about what we feel like is some of the challenges there, we'll kind of describe what some of the pros and cons are to using those things. Anyway, Simon, anything else to add for this slide?
No, it's pretty much it's because it's coming from the position of where we began when we started to look at we had the whole toolkit, but we then also had the Oculus kit, then you also had the Steam kit, and then you also had every other vendor. And if you look at today, this is getting exponential because you're seeing more and more vendors like Unreal, Magic
Oh, we're
Leap,
losing you.
others. And we lose me? That's not good. Any better?
Yep.
Yep. So yeah, and it's only getting exponential by the fact that we're having like some Magic Leap, we're having Unreal, all these others, and there's more and more kits, more and more stores, and more things come along. And this is sort of where we sort of drew the line in the sand and said, well, we've got to do something about this, and sort of look towards as what we need to actually to achieve what we're doing next.
Right, and then one of the other things that we wanted to do as well is make sure that the hardware vendors still have full control over their native APIs and how they want to expose that information. So we'll kind of get into that a little bit more. But one of the important things that we wanted to do was be able to, create a single project that we were able to only have to code one time, and write and create assets for, and then be able to target different platforms and then build out to those things without having to go and create a new project for every variant, essentially. And that was one of the big things, even with Unity, is that it was very hard to build something for iOS and then switch over to Android, and even more so. But I think that is starting to get a little bit better now. But I think that's more of like how people were coding things and how a lot of the software was previously defined. A lot of people were using compiler directives to, if-def things out and get it to compile on certain platforms.
The land of if-def.
Right, but part of that is it's all about how you approach the software strategy. And then one of the other things too is we wanted to unify the input system, and then be able to make it as extensible as possible, so that if you wanted to, if you had an edge case, we'd be able to give you at least all the tools that you needed to be able to solve that. And ideally, at the beginning, we wanted to essentially make it so that there was essentially 3 paths of development, and not even just what your role was, but more or less, you could create a project without having any coding experience. And we wanted to be able to get you to be able to set up a project and without any coding or without touching any scripts, and maybe you're just an artist but you want to do a quick prototype. Or if you had all of the experience, like maybe you've been doing .NET applications for 20 years or C++ development for who knows even longer. And we wanted to make sure that, from beginner to intermediate to expert, you'd be able to essentially create anything you wanted out of the box.
Yeah, this is sort of like the foundation we're aiming for. So we sat down, and this was 6 months even on paper. I was bashing our heads together, looking at different ways that things can work. Also looking at ways to actually improve performance. So building in Unity using mono behaviors everywhere, that has a significant performance impact, although you might not realize it in the fact that you're just crafting your project to work on a particular device, not realizing that a third or even a quarter or a third of your performance part has already been taken away from you before you even start. We'll look at all these different architectural patterns, lots of different things on here, and as you say, trying to make it to the fact that the true nature of you have to create your project on one unified platform. It has one way of doing input. It has one way of actually crafting things in the scene. And if you want to have more of your own things into it, have an easy plug and play architecture. You could actually just put things in and have them just work without having the complicated nature of them worrying about, oh, is it going to work on this platform, or is it going to do this? Or, well, I need it to run on iOS, but not on Android and other things. And a lot of these things were the foundation we're going through of what we really needed to be able to bring this. And we've lost Steve for briefly.
I'm telling
you,
he's
teleported.
That UI, I teleported by accident.
Oh, yeah.
But
we have a
to kind of get back to your point about, to get back to your point about the mono behaviors, a lot of people like to write a majority of their app logic in the mono behaviors. We actually saw, by switching to the framework that we created, we saw a 70% increase in performance just from having all of our business logic be just part of a pure C# object that is managed by a single service locator that is. We have one mono behavior that hooks into everything in the scene, and then from there you have all of your business app logic that goes and does everything it needs to do. But essentially, it was the Unity event functions like update. It's actually very slow. The more game objects you have in the scene, the slower and the performance you get, which was pretty surprising to us. And I think Unity actually has a blog post about it that they did a long time ago. So if you guys are curious about that, you could check out that blog post. But then also check out the article I wrote on Medium about the mixed reality framework. I go into depth about the advantages of kind of breaking away from mono behaviors. Now, mono behaviors you still have to use for any UI elements within the scene. So you're always going to have mono behaviors if you want to have components that you attach to game objects. That's obvious. But what we wanted to do was make sure that that anything that was in the scene was interactable and is only considered to be a UX element, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, as we're looking at this and what we're trying to achieve is like, we want to get to a world where everything you see in this table here, I have one project for. Doesn't matter what it is you're doing, how it's working. I design my solution, my product that I want to actually get out in the world, be it the product viewing tool, or whether it's like a command and control center. It shouldn't have to keep changing how my project works just because of the device. And ironically, we at the Mixed Reality Developer Summit we did last year, these are all the devices we ran it on. And that was at the stage where we were over a year ago. And we're still extending what the platform is. But this was our initial goal. And obviously got everything here. There's a sneak peek of a very early HoloLens 2 that snuck into the event because that was actually brought along. And we did even run the XRTK on that at the time, and it worked. First off, granted, we didn't have hands tracking, we didn't have eye tracking, a few other things that they're having in, but out of the box, it built, it ran, it worked. It's very useful. So everything you see there, we actually managed to run the XRTK on even from back then. Yeah, so obviously that was sort of our linchpin where we're trying to leapfrog off from.
And the way we had designed it is, as you add more platforms, essentially it's just kind of filling in the gap. So it'll still run on the platform, and then you could start lighting up features as they either become available or as you need them as well.
Yeah.
So it doesn't just break out, right?
Yeah, we always run, except an odd build every now and again. So this is where this is what became the XRTK, and the main difference, the one big difference we get asked about. What's the MRTK? What's the XRTK? Effectively, the MRTK is enterprise. It's Microsoft's own focus around the HoloLens, where the XRTK is more about the community. It's about broader depth of devices. It's about faster analytics to actually get to the solutions you need, and also responding more directly to community feedback. And also, this is also fully open source. We have several members of the community who just freely come along. They want to add a new platform. They want to have something work. They just jump in and they start coding. In fact, Steve and I were the ones who started the XRTK, but there's a guy called Dino, who I believe might even be in the audience, unless his name's different, who's actually writing our hands implementation system. And others have come along and added new systems. And we even have, because also we have no ties directly with Microsoft, we're also a lot more open with some of the vendors we keep talking to. So a lot of vendors are a lot more comfortable about coming to us and talking to us and say, hey, can you just put this system in? And either we'll say, well, you give us test hardware, build it for you, or this is how the XRTK works. We'll sit down those sessions and they will craft their own. All of it goes then back into the toolkit. So it's a much more faster, adaptable, and reinforced framework. And
yeah, open.
I know. But you'll see likely, because thanks to actual Stephen's adoption to Lenovo, I think you're going to see even more of an acceleration in our time to do it, because obviously over the last years or so, it's all been part-time. Granted, I'm still part-time, but I'm less than part-time at the moment with this little situation going on in healthcare. It just seems to get in the way. But we're accelerating a lot more about making sure we have the time, the resources, and the ability we need to actually get more platforms and more capabilities built into the platform. But ultimately, this was our raison d'etre. This is why we wanted to build it and how we're going to do it, because we had 3 different target audiences we want to address to. So we wanted people with no coding knowledge. They basically want to do quick prototypes, designers, people who didn't really like to code, and they'll be able to decide to launch up the project, throw a game through game options in the scene, and it would just work. And we're granted our SDK at the moment, the part that has all these single components, is a bit light at the moment, mainly because we've been addressing all the core foundation components. But that is an ultimate goal, and I think we're getting help from other support and vendors to basically accelerate that, to make sure that all the best practices for how you do interactivity, how you do near and far interactions, those will all be built into the SDK for use. But obviously, we recognize as well there are a middle ground of people. People are like a case of, well, I like to take what you got, but I like to tweak it, I like to change it, I like to make it my own. I want to do things slightly differently. And again, we have a core framework, and we have a fair amount of documentation, not a great deal. It's still in beta, which would cover basically so you can take the framework, you can code your own, you can build your own components, throw things in there, and have them just work. And as long as you follow the same patterns and guidances that we do, it will work. And then obviously, I also allow for those people who really case of like, just give me the framework. Don't give me all that user-friendly stuff that you want to do. I want to build my own. I want to build my own systems. And due to the interchangeable nature of how the XRTK is built, which you'll see shortly, each and every system that is in the framework is independent. No interdependencies for how things work. You don't like the way the input system works, you can write your own. As long as you keep to the same standards, everything else in the framework will work. If you don't like how certain other features work, they can do. Our diagnostic system, I think we've seen 2 different variations of it in the past. And it's a case of, you don't want the way our default works, write your own. Plug it in, and everything else will simply work and react to it.
Part of the advantages to that as well is if you want to do A/B testing, like say you have a new feature that rolls out, or you have new features that you want to add to existing ones, you're also able to test those as well. But not only that, but even kind of expanding on that a little bit more, like say you, especially with like how we've done it, a lot of it is just defined in the interfaces. So the interfaces are essentially a contract from us to the developers, and that's really where the breaking changes happen as well. So a lot of it is coordinated very well. So if you have something, you don't have to adhere to the contract. You have to at least adhere to the contract, but then however you want to implement certain features is totally up to you under the hood, inside of that service.
Yeah. So if you want to go through some of the core features of the way we build out the system, and this is by no means a complete list. These are some of the really big, meaty systems part of the actual framework itself. So the input system, that's your baby.
Yeah, and that's even that's still going through some changes at the moment. With our next release, we're going to have it's going to be a lot different, a lot simpler as well to kind of create new and implement new inputs. So that'll be nice.
Yeah,
the mapping kind of is different as well, but everyone has their own interesting ways of doing input. So for us, what we want to do with the input specifically was kind of abstract out everything as much as possible. So you weren't having to think about like, oh, I want the user to interact with the joystick to do an action. What we wanted to do was make it simpler than that. Like, so we wanted people to sit down and define every action that a user can take within the application. And then from there, you can essentially wire up each control to raise that action, depending on if that control has certain access constraints. Like, there's a trigger is a one-dimensional float value, so it's a 1D. And then touchpads and joysticks are 2-dimensional. And then you have 3DOF controllers and 6DOF controllers. So what we wanted to do was just kind of break it down to the individual constituent components of input and what you expect those things to be. And we wanted to constrain the actions that users can do based on those inputs that you might have. Excuse me. And then at the end, go ahead.
Go.
Oh no, I muted real quick just to sneeze. And then at the end of the day, and then you essentially at the end of the day you add a component for input, and you're essentially just choosing from different actions, and then you're listening for those actions on the UX side. So on the UX side, and everything that's in a mono behavior, everything is already abstracted out from the platform. So you don't have to worry about, oh, does this platform support this or that or whatever. Essentially, you just have to know about all the actions that has already been defined for your application way back in the pre-production stage. And all you have to do is just kind of go through and be like, okay, well, this UX component is for this action, and you're essentially doing all the things that you need to do within the application. So I think it helps a lot of UX designers. The last project I did, I found our UX designer seemed to really appreciate that, and he could focus more on like the look and feel of it, and he didn't have to worry about having to code in the interactions as much.
Yeah, I mean, where that comes down to is that, we've separated out what is arguably the physical. So I can't show you here, so this is a hand. I've got a hand here. It's got fingers. I'm on the control. I've got buttons. I've got thumbsticks and things like that. But when you're building your project, you don't want to care about where something is coming from. Ultimately, what you want to do is say, well, I've got this button, and it's going to get pressed. And that's at a design. That's all you care about. Or if I'm going to have a control system where I'm going to move, well, okay, so right, well, I can move forward, move back, we can left, we can move right. You don't need it. And depending on which way the users configure these controllers, you don't want to be hampered by, oh, well, I've got to have this control scheme, this control scheme, this control scheme. It's like, this is my solution, my product. It has things I do logically within my project. And then the designers react to the case of, right, well, when this thing happens, I need to animate this system, or I need to do this. So it abstracts around what it is. And then in the actual physical layer, with their map to say, right, well, when at build time, when I've designed my project, the X button is going to launch the select action, the thumbstick is going to launch the teleport action, and it separates those out. So it makes life a lot simpler and a lot easier for when the designers and you are working with the project logically, and how we're actually mapping everything else physically. And it also gives you, from a developer's perspective, a lot more freedom and control about how you manage and maintain that going forward.
Oh yeah, and then you don't have to worry about another thing too is you don't have to worry about you're more worried about the data. You're not necessarily worried about the action associated with that data. I don't know if that makes sense. So I noticed especially with like even the new input system from Unity, you're still worried about whether or not it's a gamepad or if it's some other thing. Really for us, we just want to know, is it a near or far interaction, and then the action that is raised from that. So we try and simplify the input quite a bit down to its more constituent components. So you're not really having to have a whole lot more overhead about, where is this coming from and all that. So I noticed the new Unity input system also uses actions. So I'm not sure if they kind of gathered that from us or vice versa.
Steam,
but I was
yeah.
working with them and Steam as well. Yeah. So I mean, we've kind of talked to those engineers back and forth over the years, and I think that just everyone's kind of come to the conclusion that having actions that users take within the application, it makes a lot more sense than having to worry about the individual control schemes themselves. And
Yeah.
really, that's more of an implementation detail of the control scheme, and not really something that you have to worry about in your main part of your application.
Yeah, I mean, other parts that make up the actual core part of the whole framework here is this whole extensible services architecture. So as we said, there's the toolkit itself is one component. It's one little service locator that sits in the middle of the heart of everything. That is the heartbeat of the whole engine. Then everything else is simply plugged into that and simply saying, right, well, I'm an input system, I'm going to register with you. I'm a diagnostic system, I'm going to register with you. I'm a networking system, and so on and so forth. And the toolkit was simply a case of reactor. Oh, this new feature is light up, right? Okay, I can get that running as well. If that system is not there, nothing breaks, because basically the toolkit goes, oh, well, you don't need that today, I'm going to go on. So as things get added, removed, and changed, things less, the toolkit is just happily getting on with its job and saying, if you're there, I'll talk to you. If you're not, I'm not going to bother. And that way you also have a certain set of precedence around the actual project, so that no matter what you do to it, it's very hard to then break it by just not having things there. Certain things might not light up, so spatial understanding might not start because that device doesn't have a spatial understanding framework. Or some services might have hands support, but others don't. And your project simply, well, it is this case of, right, well, if hands are there, I can use hands. If not, and I don't, I'm using controllers, and so on.
Yeah, and what's interesting is actually the input system was the first one that we kind of came up with. This is kind of a layover from the very early days, but a lot of the architecture was based off of how that input system works and the event system works within that. And that actually carried around over to all of the other extensible service architecture base. So it's kind of interesting to see why the input system kind of started from there and has kind of like branched out into all these other different ways that we do things. We just kind of took what we learned and kind of brought it into every other feature area.
Yeah, and that kind of sort of that same learning then went on to sort of work on the sort of this abstracted hardware pattern. It's almost like a abstracted hardware layer. So no matter what we've got on top and what you're building in your projects, the underlying pins of how we work with the different vendors, all we're really doing is say, right, well, you're talking in one language, we need to translate you to the XRTK, and we just take out the bits of the data we need from that platform to basically make light up all the features that are there. So we know how controls work, we know how a headset works. If you've got a hands implementation on, how does your hands data work? Right, we'll translate to what we mean by hands, which means that the added benefit of that is then when you're building projects, you only have one way of having to do things. Everything's sort of abstracted around how that works.
So essentially each of the platform vendors creates an adapter essentially for their native library. And that adapter is essentially what we call data providers. And the data providers are the lowest level of the abstraction. And essentially it just gathers up data from these native libraries so that the service, which is the platform agnostic part, is able to just get events or data from these data providers and provide that to your app on the UX side or your business app logic services in a way that's platform agnostic and essentially in a way that is more elegant. So you're more worried about just getting information from a single place instead of having to go down yourself into all these different native libraries to get the information you want. It comes to you.
Yeah, and there's a few other things there which we won't go too much now because, we are planning for this UI library, which basically comes off of the common standards of what is a button, how does it work, how does it work when you physically push it, how does it work when you're at a distance and pointing to something and putting it, whether it's teleport systems, whether it's hotspots and things like that, all those kind of just runtime things which are built with the designers, we're working with a lot of design teams, we'll come to that. But if we move on here, so we can look at sort of the actual raw behind, because obviously a picture tells 1,000 more words than this. And this is effectively just the original architecture for the XRTK. And it's true to its fact, the fact in over 2 years, this diagram hasn't really changed. The whole core of the architecture, the foundations that we spent all that time designing has not changed. We've refined how things are implemented. We've changed how they are. We've looked at some of the relationships they are, but ultimately it's the same thing.
Yeah, again, at the very top is the presentation scene layer. It's every single game object in your application should belong in the UX layer. Absolutely no platform-specific code. This includes the event handlers, any UX, and then anything in the SDK. And then that blue layer, the next layer down, is our service locator, and that is essentially the only mono behavior within the system. And that's the only thing that really ties the system into the scene, because other than that, there's really no way to get the scene events from Unity that I'm aware of. I think now there is. I think at the time, now they have, I don't know if this is still in the experimental thing, but you are able to get some event player loop things, and I think it's somehow a delegate of some sort, but I haven't really looked into too much. And then underneath that, you have the core systems, which these are all the platform agnostic systems or services. System and a service are interchangeable. System is essentially has one singular runtime value, and you can't register duplicates of it, whereas services, you can register multiple to be able to do that. Data providers at the very bottom, they are essentially the adapters or the wrappers around the native libraries that are platform specific. And these are actually technically services as well, but they're more specialized. And they can only be children of the services in the middle layer there. And then all along on the very right-hand side, we have essentially interfaces that define all of these different components. So if you want to create your own versions of these things, you can. And as long as you're implementing that interface, then it will work with everything within the entire system architecture. So part of that too, kind of going back to what I was talking about, the way that it works at the very top, everything in the scene presentation layer is all event driven. So it's either only showing the state of the application or responding to events from any of the services in the middle layer. So essentially, it's don't call us, we'll call you. And then everything on the very bottom layer is hidden from the very top layer. So you won't actually see anything platform specific in your UX at all.
Yeah, and that loves the fact that it all comes down to, what system you're building for, what platform am I running on, and that's all really the system needs to know. And then things will light up, turn on, turn off based upon those two factors. And those are things you define as effectively a design time when you're building a project, saying, right, I want these services on for this platform, I want these things on when I recognize this system, and so on and so forth. And that's something we've refined of late, because what we found is that there's, especially now as we get more and more devices that are all on the Android platform, you can't just say it's Android, because now it's Lumen for Magic Leap, or it's Oculus for Oculus, and also Unreal and everything else, and they're all using the Android platform. So we need to be able to, even from a distinction layer of knowing, right, well, I'm running on this vendor's hardware on this device, and having ways to recognize and understand and then perform when it comes to that device without any. And that is something we do underneath the hood. All you're simply doing is dropping a checkbox and saying, oh, well, it's this and this and this. And we've done all the hard work for you to make sure that those all still work.
Yeah, it was really interesting that you brought that up. So especially with Android, I think at the moment you have Oculus. I think one of the hardware products that I'm using at Lenovo is also Android. But then also you have Unreal, which is also Android. So there's a lot of different platforms that run on the Android, but you want to make sure that the native libraries are there, or maybe you're actually building to that thing. So that was one of the other things that we needed to do as well, was kind of more specialize the build system, and that's actually something that we have kind of on our roadmap that we need to do a little bit better. Because you also have to, add custom definitions to some of the manifests and stuff, and that can be kind of tricky, and and it could be different depending on every single one of these different hardware platform vendors and all of the different options that they have. So we want to make it a lot easier to deal with. And I think right now at the moment, Unity's build window doesn't really is maybe a little bit lacking in that regard. Like, you still have to go through all your player settings, and you still have to go through every platform and get it just right. And even then, for different platform vendors, you may have different build, like Unity build settings just for those. And we want to be able to automate that a little bit more. So it's just one less thing that you have to worry about. So you're more worried about focusing and working on your project, not trying to get it working, and not having to fight the editor.
Well, I'm going to take a bit of audience participation. I'm going to take some audience participation here. So, show of the case. So, it's not that. Show of nice little hand. Thanks. Okay. So, how many people have had to try and build for Oculus Quest on Android? Yes. Isn't it fun trying to create the Android manifest for that thing, and all the different API levels, and all the different settings, all the things you're going to do, and then you go and try and build for another Android platform, and all that is blown out the water because it doesn't work on anywhere else? Isn't it fun? Well, you've had to know, this does all that for you. We have tools and things that make that quicker. But even today, there's still some hoops to jump through. Hey, look, I'm at home and my dogs are shouting. Yay! And internet, there's steps to get through that but obviously what we're aiming for when we have our full build system in, it would let every platform, no matter what it is, a simpler click of, right, I'm going to build for these platforms, one button. And then we will script out Unity to go, right, create this build, 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 and it's all done for you. And all you have to do is take those packages and push those to whichever stores you want, or which devices you want to sideload to. That's our ultimate roadmap aim of where we're getting to.
Yep.
And
that's actually part of what I'm working on at.
You've done, and that's it. I then go to the platform and can actually go and then check. I'm going to go down to my project settings. I'm going to make sure that I've got XRTK enabled. This is going to run on like the Oculus Rift, which is not. I'm going to use Oculus Quest with a link cable. Isn't that fantastic? I'm going to check for any other settings that are ready, and then once I'm done, I'm going to go and I'm going to connect my Quest up via the link. Is it active? But it is, because I'm actually on the Quest right now, because it'd be interesting if it wasn't. But then it's going to get selected, then I'm basically going to do one simple test. I'm going to run the quest via the link in the editor. And this is going to be a simple runtime. Go, this isn't really anything fancy. I'm running in the editor, so what? Well, there we go. I've now got in at the start of the scene, and every big project, one of the principles we have is that you install, you configure, you play. You get controllers, you get manipulation, you get teleportation, you even get ground physics and things controls out of the box. You've done nothing for this to run. And then I can select this cube, I can do around, and I can even just teleport. Those things are there by default. You've done nothing. You can configure them to change them how you want. And oh wait, that's not. No, don't. No, you're not supposed to see this. That's new. That's hands running in the actual editor. Sorry, I suppose I shouldn't have said that. Okay, that was actually happy accents. Well, there we go.
I'd like to see anybody.
Yes.
And that's using Oculus Link hands.
Yes, that's using Oculus Link hands in the editor. That's
in the editor.
It's really good for testing if you need to test hands interactions. We found that out by accident that it actually worked.
I'd like to see somebody else get that working. If
Okay,
anybody else has
so
it.
running the editor, anyone can run in the editor. That doesn't really prove anything. At the end of the day, I need to build it. So I'm going to go build it for Windows. I'm going to put it in a project, and we've got the most fastest build system in the world. It's called video editing, which means you don't have to wait. We're not going to sit here and wait 3 weeks while this builds. Don't worry. So I'm going to go build. I'm going to let go. This is about the only thing I've edited in these videos is to simply cut down all of the time that Unity does something. So whether it's importing, whether it's building, and there we go, we're built. Yay!
One thing I want to note here is that he's using the native Unity build window. We do have a build window that I'd prefer that you use, just because it helps do more of the automation stuff for you. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah. Now, one interesting thing here is the case of this is not using Unity's Oculus drivers and this. This is actually using Oculus's own DLLs natively in the system. None of their prefab, none of their components. And you can see this there running on the device, so fine. I'm now actually running this on the Oculus Link there, and everything again still works. I've shipped it, I've built it, it's tested, it works exactly as I expect. But honestly, now I want, fine, one platform, again, nothing singing or dancing. What about somewhere else? So I'm going to take the same project, go back to Unity now. Come on, go back to Unity. There you go. And I'm going to change platforms now over to the Windows Universal platform, so I can build for Windows Universal, which is basically any Windows Mixed Reality headset, HoloLens 2, HoloLens 1, however you like. Quickest switch ever. I'm going to check to make sure my XR settings are set up.
I don't even know if we need to do that anymore now that we're moving more towards the native stuff. Once we've gone fully native, I don't even think we need to do that, except maybe enable the VR settings. But one of the things that we're trying to do is actually break away from the requirement for Unity's native XR plugin architecture. So the XRTK is essentially a competitor to that. Yeah.
Well, the post demo there towards the end obviously is that how many things did I change to actually get to run on Windows? Nothing. So your project you designed, that worked exactly as. And that is true of every single platform that works on the project. Okay? So it doesn't matter which one you pick, it will still just work. When there are obviously things, design considerations, if you're having a 2D interface versus a 3D interface versus an AR interface versus a VR interface, those are design things you take, but your project itself has no impact at all.
By the time we're done with the SDK, you won't even need different UX components for AR versus VR versus 2D versus 3D. That's our main goal there. Well, it used to be, back in the day, you have to have two different layouts for web, for mobile and then for desktop. But now it's, it's more of it's more reactive. Well, we want to do the same thing for 2D versus 3D to make those more reactive as well. So you design one and create one UX interface, and it works on every screen type and every screen size. Yeah. That's our plans for the SDK, which is our next phase after we finish the core. After our next release here.
Yeah. So this is obviously the usual information side. They won't make sure these links are available for everyone afterwards. May want to remember is xrtk.io. just go there, and that's the launch point for finding us or anywhere, and also everyone else who's involved in the project. And we also welcome you to sort of join our Discord. If you've got ideas, got questions, if there are things you need when you're trying to build a project, put them down in the suggestions. This is a fully open source, community-driven framework. If there is something everyone says, well, I need a button I can throw in the air, right, we'll build a button that throws in the air. Or we'll work with you to help build whatever that is, then contribute that back to the framework, and then your name is in lights along with the framework, along with everyone else's. So, yep, this is. I think we're getting cold for time. So, yep. So, I think we're going to start questions. So, if anyone wants to raise their hand to ask a question, then I think Steve and I would be more than happy to talk about it, and then we'll still be around afterwards to ask more questions if you so wish.
Thanks, guys, a lot. Let me come up here and help you guys. So if we can get a round of hands for that, that was a really informative presentation. That was awesome. So I think we'll do is a run questions. I'll run through the panel. So guys, throw the questions through there. Then afterwards, if we don't mind, in usual fashion, we'd love to get a picture with everybody. We'll rush the stage and do a picture, but we'll do formal questions first. So let's throw these up real quick. So I think the panel's been open. You should have an option now to raise your hand. Do you guys not see that yet?
Yeah, I've got it.
You got it.
Everyone
right?
should
Yeah.
have it. Yes, I'll raise my hand. I'll put it
Oh,
down
look,
again.
there's some.
Yeah, I asked
so
myself
you're
a
in
question. Yes,
So
anyone
I've got
if you want to ask a question, just hit the raise hand. Yep.
I got a question. I'll kick it off. So I've done a lot with MRTK over the last year and a half, and I've just started to mess around with your all's work. They work together, correct?
That's right.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to kind of look at some of that stuff before, but from my experience, that's pretty crazy. A lot of what they said earlier is right on, and so I can't tell you how much time it saved me. So I still got to thank you guys a lot, man. It's pretty wild what you guys are doing.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, we aim to please.
Questions.
It's very quiet. This has to be the very first session I've been to and no one's asked a question. Anyone who asks anything? I mean, like, where does Stephen live?
We got one question.
I
won't
won't
get a
be
question.
answering that.
We got a question by Todd. All right, Todd, I'm gonna give you the mic. Oh, there you go.
Okay, can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, go.
Sure can.
Well, thanks again for a great presentation. Definitely learned a lot on things. With regards to licensing, is there any restrictions with embedding this into a commercial product?
No, in fact, I use it quite a bit for most, if not all, of my projects that I've worked on to date, including from MRTK to HTK. That was one of the big things that I kind of ensured as I was going about doing all of these. So every project I've worked on to date has had some version of a toolkit that has been in it. So even when I was working for a defense contractor, to working for private companies, to working for public companies, I've used the toolkit in all of these. So we're using an MIT license. That kind of gives you pretty good flexibility. But then I've also had to have projects that have gone through security reviews with both the government and for other governments. So if that tells you anything, I think it should be okay.
Yeah, the
Awesome.
aim to be as open as possible, realistically, so that, the whole point is the fact that this is supposed to be free and open for anyone to use. It's always going to be free. And what we aim is the fact that this is a collaboration. So we work with you to help you make the toolkit the best it can be to make sure the fact that it hit all the markets and the platforms that you need to target. And again, if you find things that you like in your experience when you're doing things, and there's customer feedback and things I want to put in, then bring it to the platform, and everyone benefits then from the whole larger framework.
Right. We want to expand the market so we can have more apps in the app marketplace. That we want all of the app marketplaces for all of the devices to have as much content as possible, so that it's much more of a fight for consumers. Consumers get to choose who's going to win the platform wars, essentially, right? Whereas right now the developers really get hurt a lot by, for example, like Magic Leap, right? So the last client that I had, they took a big bet on Magic Leap, and Magic Leap kind of ended up falling out, and now who knows what's going to happen with that. Well, they took a lot of time and money to invest in Magic Leap, but the nice thing is the app that we built, we could put on other platforms than just Magic Leap. So all of the time and money that they invested in that application isn't going to go poof, gone, because they can easily retarget, put it on HoloLens, or put it on any other device that comes out.
Cool. Awesome. Great work, guys.
Yep.
Can I ask a question?
Go for it.
Yeah. So basically, are you guys saying that you would be happy to host anything roughly in terms of events on this platform, and support people who are trying to do that within this platform?
I think that's a question for you, John.
So I could barely hear you, man. Sorry, I didn't go through the system, so I couldn't amplify you.
Yeah, no worries. So I'm just wondering, like, how what you're basically saying is you're happy, free of charge, to help anyone produce any kind of event, any kind of experience within this world.
Oh, from within
Within
Altspace?
Altspace? That's
Yeah.
different.
Yeah,
that's different. Yeah.
That's a little different. Yeah. Yeah. So Altspace itself is a you could think of it as like a platform-ish type of thing. It's basically Unity executable.
This isn't extra. Yeah, I think it's a little off-topic question, but I
Yeah.
think it's still a good question.
From our
Yeah,
group, the creators, we're willing to help with a lot of that stuff. So again, in our Discord, and so if this is the first time you've been, we would suggest come check our Discord out and pop questions in there. We got a really healthy community of people to help you with that type of stuff.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, John, I think someone did some sessions about how to start getting your sessions online in Altspace as well. And it was really well received.
I think we do have another question. All right, so we've got one other question here. Let me get it going here. I should be getting. There you go.
Yeah, hello. I joined in the middle, so I might have missed something. I was wondering, do you also contain, or like, do you plan addressing some of the issues with networking or with physics, or what are your plans on that?
Yeah, I mean, we can add any other services that we want to control game objects. So essentially the way that we kind of have it set up is each of the services has ownership over game objects in the scene. And then from there, you have a lot of control over the object lifecycle for those things. So we wanted to make a lot of it as much purely C# as possible. And then you are just sending events out to those game objects. So any type of native library that you want to bring in should essentially be compatible. Now we do have some interfaces defined and some some interfaces and some contracts defined for networking, but I don't think we have a working networking system at the moment. I think it's a little bit different with MRTK. They've been working on that quite a bit longer, and they have WebRTC, I believe. So it's a little bit different, but we want to eventually start working on other things like that. It's just time and effort, right?
Also, saying that, I mean, the offshoot projects from the RTK, things like the WebRTC project and the sharing things, those things I think will be probably fully compatible with the XRTK. It's just a case of plugging them in because they're still built along the same patterns. Might need some tweaks and things, but ultimately, we worked with those teams when they were building those projects to make sure that they were compatible with the toolkits type frameworks. So they built it predominantly aiming to target the MRTA because the MRTK was built on the same platform when they were built the XRTK. Those things should be easily transferable, as are some things in the MRTK, but less so more and more these days because we sort of changed some of the foundation bits more radically to be more performance, more enhancement, and more along the design principles of how we wanted the XRTK to drive.
Yeah, and it's probably a lot simpler to implement some things, although they do have a wizard, which is nice, but I
saw the toolbox was
point
nice.
of view, it's a little bit different. We try to make it a lot simpler.
Yeah, we do try to collaborate with them when we can and we'll pass ideas back into. So it's all fairly open, although obviously the gap between the two frameworks is just getting wider and wider, more because of how they've gone down the enterprise track of just those enterprise things, where we're more servicing a wider audience realistically.
Yeah, I think the biggest complaint I had really was just that they made changes to the core because they were trying to get the UX to work, their SDK. With the SDK is really good, but I think they compromised a lot in flexibility in the core parts of it. So we'll see what happens. We really wanted to focus more time on making sure that the core bits of how the system works was much more defined and refined and really working really well. And then our next phase, essentially, we want to work on the UX systems a little bit better and the SDK.
Yep. So any other questions, John?
Yeah, I think it's one.
Really
We got two
quick.
more in here. We got James. Throwing the mic to you.
Hi, guys. Really great talk. Thank you. My question is, if there's any discussion about eventually like expanding this framework so that you can more easily go from Unity to like A-frame or to the AltSpace mixed reality extensions.
I think AltSpace is Unity, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So
I think it's
that's up to
slightly
them.
different. Yeah, I think from the design principle, the way we built it and designed the XRTK, there's a lot of things which are potentially transferable to other engines. I mean, we've talked about different engines in the past. I mean, ultimately, we want to get to a position where it's the best it can be on Unity, and then sort of then look to take of how we can then take it to other frameworks. So things like, we looked at Unreal, they do things slightly differently. Some parts of the toolkit would work for that, others wouldn't. And then it'd be a case of translating that to how that would work with Unreal, or even compiling some of the features to work with Unreal. We looked at things like monogame, and A-frame is a slightly different position because ultimately the whole web angle, especially Unity, is a bit in flux at the moment. Although I think we're reliably told there are going to be changes down the line from the likes of Mozilla and things like that. But I think A-frame is sort of a side because what you would do is you build a WebXR style project and consume that in an A-frame solution. So it's slightly different when it comes to A-frame and things like that. You've got more of an idea of that, haven't you, Steve?
So in a nutshell, we designed the toolkit to solve Unity-specific problems, but there may be things that translate over, but it won't be anything that is one-to-one. So the design principles, the architecture, design, and everything like that transfers over, but none of the code would. But I mean, Unity does have their libraries as a service. So I mean, you could compile it out and then use that and embed that in any of the other platforms or engines that you want. So, I mean, it's really interesting. For me, I don't think that the current web technologies is going to be viable for future XR. Like WebXR, I think the whole track they're doing with that is not good. Like JavaScript and a DOM and a HTML model, like for 3D content, like why does it take 3 languages to render a single web page? And then think about extrapolating that into 3D and doing that more. I mean, really the answer is going to be that we need some sort of engine or something, that's much more robust. And I think really the answer there is WebAssembly. That way, it's a lot more abstracted out. You can use your own rendering engine. You can use your own whatever language you want. And I have a feeling that a lot of that's going to go away. All the current web technologies are going to go away for the spatial web. There's no way that people are going to be able to hold on to that and get the performance they want out of it.
Yeah. All right, we got one more question here, and then we'll kind of just open the stage, do our pictures, and then just be more informal. All right, so Mike, I'm going to give you the mic. There you go.
Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Hello. I was wondering if there's any sort of things that are available like on PC VR that aren't on mobile VR AR due to like processing power, or is it like anything that everything runs everywhere, or are there certain features that are only available on certain platforms?
So at the moment, I believe it's just whatever is implemented on that platform. As far as performance goes, we write everything to be as performant as possible. Now, when it comes to art assets, that's going to be up to you, right, on your development team. So you're going to create different art assets depending on the platform because you want different quality. But as far as, different things based on performance, we don't really have anything like that because we don't really need it. We already write everything to be as performant as possible. And then if the platform doesn't support it, it just doesn't run. But your application should fall back, like, it falls back elegantly, right? So all of the systems, if there isn't a feature that's available, then it falls back elegantly and it doesn't like just spam you with, this thing doesn't exist.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately it comes down to the design pattern, how you're doing. I mean, quality is about the only thing that as a designer you're still going to have to cope with. I mean, even AltSpace, so AltSpace when it runs, it has 2 different levels. It's got a asset bundle, which is basically like for the low end, the Oculus Quest to mobile devices, and then it's got another asset bundle, which is for the high-end PC, HVR ones, just to make sure the fact that everyone who's using the solution, even if they're in the same space, gets the same experience. but with some things lift up, things lift not. So from a design principle, and when you're saying, well, in my broad spectrum of targets, 30% of them are going to be low-end devices to make sure I've got the entry level, and another 60% are going to be like high-end ones. You simply craft around your effects and the way your solution works around those two environments, and then provide like bundling mechanisms to work with those. So that's more of a design question rather than a toolkit question, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Mike, I'm sorry, not Mike. Alex, did you have a question? I saw you raise your hand. Anyone else have any questions?
Don't see any other questions, guys.
Okay.
All right, so John, how do you want to do this? We do our group picture?
Yeah, why don't we do that? So the stage is opened up and mute is off, so people can talk to each other and we can mingle and do whatever for as long as people want to stay.
Okay, cool.
The camera bot is up in the air there, so if you pretty much get up in this gray area, you'll be in the camera.
Yep, I'm going to stand on the back because for some reason I'm higher than everyone else.
Oh, Simon, do you want to?
I keep ruffling Stephen's hair.
Simon, do you want to throw up a different slide or anything, or are you good with whatever's up there?
Sorry, it's too.
Am I in the
Go back to the
way?
original.
Hello, hang on.
Yeah, no, nobody's. I mean, we're all kind of. We're just crowded up
There
in
we
a
go.
little area. Don't worry about it.
We're both to the side over here. There we go.
So it looks like
There we
everybody's in here. Just go ahead and throw up some emojis, wave, whatever you want to do.
Oh, yeah, emojis. We like emojis.
Cool. Thanks so much, Simon and Stephen. And if people want to hang out and talk to each other, ask questions, whatever, I don't know how much time every Simon and Stephen have, but we can hang out for a few minutes. And we appreciate it. Thanks for everybody for showing up.
I'm happy to stay as long as anyone needs me.